Erica Middle.
Okay.
Hi, I think we've got it.
We got it now.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Erica Middleton.
Hi, everyone. I am Cynthia Wheeler, and we are your graduate assistants in the Office of the Dean of the Chapel.
Woo, we're so excited to have another communal conversation tonight, aren't we, Cynthia?
Yes, so excited. As usual, Erica, we have a great panel, right? And we have a great topic.
As usual, it is what it is. We have the best students, truly.
The best students ever. And they have a ton that they want to talk about tonight, right? Like, we're just going to get into it. Okay, right. We're excited, so excited to get into this tonight. So we are here for Communal Conversations, a presidential Accountabili-Buddies Day. What we are going to do is we are going to go over Joe Biden's first 75 days in office and talk about what he's accomplished, what he's not accomplished, where he needs to, just make it up, and what he can do in his next 25 days to, just round out his first 100 days. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to introduce the wonderful students who are going to be assessing President Biden. Go ahead and bring them up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nigel Johnson. I'm a junior political science and economics double major from Port St. Lucie, Florida, and I proudly serve as the president of the Howard University College Democrats.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Oluwatobi Mojiba-Ologun, but I go by Toby. I am a senior economics major and math minor from the Bronx, New York, and I am representing the Chapel Assistants.
Hi, everyone. My name is Simone Rice. I'm a junior health science major, psychology minor from Richmond, California, and I serve as the treasurer of the Howard University College Democrats.
All right, everyone. Hello, welcome. We're so excited to get into the conversation tonight. But first, I invite you all to join us in a word of prayer as we enter into this space, and everybody can get in the position that makes them most comfortable to pray. And we'll do that together. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for bringing us all here today under the sound of my voice. I pray that we have a great, insightful conversation tonight with these students, and they have the ability to share what's on their hearts, minds, and spirits. Please continue to bless the leadership in this country. Please continue to bless the leadership of our university and continue to hold them accountable and continue to hold them in spaces that they are still able to serve and they are still able to protect. We know you to be a God of justice. We know you to be a God of mercy. So we invite you to continue to move in the lives and the communities of the people we work with and the people we serve. In your precious name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Amen. That was excellent. Erica, I think we're ready to get into the conversation.
I think so. Let's start it off with a conversation, a question. I know tonight is our Accountabili-Buddies, event. And so I just wanted to kind of start it off with a question of what does the concept of accountability mean to you all? And how do you model accountability for yourself and others? It can be individual accountability or communal accountability. But how does accountability, play a role in your lives and the lives of the people you hope to serve? And we could start with Simone.
Hi, yes. I would say accountability for me means that one actually follows through on commitments that are made in the past and ensuring that at some given point in the future, whether it's like a 3-month, 6-month, year period, that there's a check-in and there's a checklist to make sure that those things have been made, and an understanding, a re-understanding if expectations need to be altered, if new things need to be learned in order to accomplish those goals. So for example, I also serve as president of the California Club. And, we had one set of expectations coming into the fall semester. And once we realized how virtual programming does and doesn't go, we readjusted our expectations for ourselves and for our members for this semester, so that, you know, we could also not make sure we don't stretch ourselves too thin, but also ensure that we are keeping ourselves accountable to each other, for ourselves, and also for our members. So I think accountability is just making goals and then making sure that you're reaching those goals at a future period in time.
I really like that. I like how you said you had to reassess the goals in the California Club, because this year has been something none of us have experienced before. So there has to be that flexibility. How about you, Nigel? What does accountability mean to you, and how do you, hold others accountable?
To me, accountability is about standards. For myself, the only way I can hold myself accountable is knowing what type of standards I'm going to hold myself to. And capabilities as well. If I know I'm able to do something, I want to hold myself to that. And the same thing for others, making it clear what your expectations are, and understanding what someone is capable of is what makes it easier for you to hold them accountable for things.
Thank you for that. That's a really good reflection. How about you, Toby? What does accountability mean to you, and how do you hold others accountable?
Yeah, I think what I'm going to say definitely echoes what Simone and Nigel said, but I think for me, the word is kind of like your responsibilities and commitments. I think those kind of are synonymous with things that Simone and Nigel said, but when you're part of a community, or even with yourself, you're going to have responsibilities to yourself, responsibilities to your community. So kind of like accountability is like account is in it, like you're holding an accounting of whether you're keeping up to your word. So I think that's, or to your responsibilities and your commitments. So I think that's what accountability is about.
Absolutely.
Yes, excellent. I mean, I love that. I love all of this. And I mean, I think all of this actually definitely covers, right, what we're talking about in terms of, or what we really need to address in terms of Joe Biden, right? Not just the standards that we initially set, or that he initially set, but following through, and if he's been assessing or reassessing and kind of figuring out if he's actually met his commitments. And so I guess I want to get you all's overall view, first of all, of how Joe Biden has met his commitments. What are you all seeing so far, or what's your assessment so far? And let's start with Nigel.
So you can see I still got my Biden-Harris sign behind me.
Yeah.
I might be a little bit biased, but I think President Biden is doing a pretty good job for his first few months in office. And I will start by saying, he doesn't have the luxury that a lot of his predecessors have. And what that luxury is that, we go to the ballot box in November, we vote, and then whatever happens, happens, and we go on with our lives. No, Joe is taking on a pandemic, a once in a generation pandemic. And so because of that, the nation is really paying attention to what our leaders are doing. Joe has all eyes on him. And so people are really going to be holding him accountable to a lot of the things that he said he was going to do. He was talking about, making sure we had like 100 million vaccinations in 50 days. And right now he's at 200 million vaccinations. He's holding himself accountable. And people are really, trying to hold him to account for a lot of the promises that he made. And, when he does things that aren't in alignment with that, we have to hold him in account. He promised, at least as I took it, we were going to get $2,000 stimulus checks, and we got $1,400. So, that those numbers don't add up to me. That's one way where I say, Joe, that's not what you said. And I think a lot of other voters are paying attention to stuff like that. But when he does do things that, earn him his credit, I give it to him. So I think for the first few months that he's been in here, he's been doing a good job, but it's because of the nature of the situation that we're in.
Excellent. Simone, I'll go to you next, and then to Toby.
Yeah, to continue off of what Nigel was saying, I think for me, what I was mostly paying attention to is the vaccinations and whatnot, because healthcare is what I do, or what I want to do. And I think I was just very surprised and actually very grateful that he was actually able to surpass the goal that he initially set so quickly and so early on. And I think that was a good indication of how serious, I guess, obviously he was taking the situation, not only from a vaccination front, but from an economic front as well. And I think that is something, that's a feat that is actually very hard to do. And I don't think that unless you work in those industries where you're actually getting people vaccinated and doing it day to day, I don't think people really understand like the immense manpower that actually had to go into that. So that was something that I was very happy about. I think also to Nigel's point about the numbers of like what monies we did get and didn't. For me, it was the minimum wage of $15. In my state of California, there's a lot of cities around here that have $15 of minimum wage and people are still struggling. So I knew for $15 in other states and even $15 here, it would increase people's minimum wages here. So I think that was something that I was very disappointed about not being executed. But at the same time, there still has to be credit given to the child tax credit or the immense amount of funding that was given to the SNAP program, or even to the funding of food banks and whatnot, and the distribution of masks through these food banks. So I think that there's definitely a lot of potential of what was done, but I think, they still obviously have a lot more to do.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And so Toby, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, personally, for me, I've always been critical of Biden. I've been critical of the Democratic Party from the left to kind of give away my politics. So for me, there's almost like it's hard for me to, I guess, be fully satisfied with whatever the Biden presidency gives, especially, and I think that's part of the kind of what the office of the presidency of the United States is. There's things that are inherent in that office that are oppressive to people like me all over around the world. But even given the promises that he made in order to get the votes of Black people, in order to get the votes of working class people all over the country, I would like to see more. He ran on, following the science, and I can see why people are not comfortable or skeptical of the U.S. government when they're reducing the social distancing distance to 3 feet for schools as a way to try to get kids into schools. So I can see the skepticism in that sense. I can see how people feel like, that profit is put over people's lives, and how we're dealing where pretty much not just Biden, but the entire Democratic Party at large is trying to push people back into work, into unsafe situations. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it, at a sense of how is the worst person in the United States doing, So that's so my question is what is Joe Biden going to do for the incarcerated person? What is Joe Biden going to do for the poorest person, for disabled people? And as far as I'm concerned, he has kept up with some of his promises, but there's certain things he's still lacking.
Thank you, Toby. That's a really good reflection of, being critical of different, meeting some campaign promises, but also the reflection that there is still people suffering and still people marginalized. I mean, of course, the least of these still exist in this society, and we do have the responsibility to take care of others. So seeing how President Biden has been addressing those as well has been really important. But I'd like to move into kind of something that I believe Nigel touched on. We just had a round of stimulus checks that were, sent out for $1,400. And they took off the restriction of adult dependents not being able to obtain the stimulus check. So I'm sure, you all are college students. You may have been considered dependent on the last two bills. I believe it was in March and December. So now you guys, would have been able to take full advantage of the last stimulus check if you were at the, of course, wage requirement. But I kind of just want to know, how have you guys felt about that economic response? I know Nigel kind of alluded to it being $1,400. There was that whole thing in Georgia, like, we're going to get those $2,000 checks if you put Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff in Congress, but it was reduced to $1,400. So just kind of, what do you guys think about the economic response with the stimulus checks? And we can start that with Nigel.
Yeah. So, a lot of times I think it's really unfortunate that our elected officials kind of try and discount those adult dependents and people our age and college level students. And so the official wording was that people got a $600 stimulus check in December, and so the $1,400 check was just to add on to that $600 and then add those two together, and you got $2,000 checks. But Joe Biden and Democrats know just as well as all of us know that adult dependents were cut out of the first two checks, so we never got that $600. So we were sent $1,400, and that's if our parents ever let us see that. And so, I think we have to really be, and I say we because I'm representing the Democratic Party, we have to be intentional about what it is that we say. If we say we're going to be giving out $2,000 checks, let's give out $2,000 checks. Let's not play word games and send 1,400s and say, do the math, and that's $2,000. That's not what you campaigned on. That's not what people in Georgia voted for. They voted for $2,000 checks, and I'll be the first one to criticize Joe Biden and the Democratic Party on that. But I think we really need to, also be thinking about other forms of stimulus payments, because, it's going to become increasingly difficult going forward to get more direct payments and direct checks going out to people, especially having to go through the House and the Senate. But it goes back to that accountability question. You hold someone accountable by having standards and knowing what they're capable of doing. And so I don't know if everyone noticed, but last week, Joe Biden requested that his Secretary of Education draft a memo to decide whether he has the legal authority to cancel up to $50,000 of student loan debt by himself. That's his capability, right? And so when we understand that Joe Biden has authority to do that, imagine the stimulus that would do, canceling $50,000 for every borrower of federal student loan debt. And when we understand capabilities like that, that's how we hold someone like Joe Biden accountable. When we don't know that power exists, we can't really pressure him on those types of things. We can't call him. We can't call him out on Twitter. We can't write emails if we don't know that he has that power. And I'm pretty sure Joe Biden already got the answer from his Secretary of Education. He's just waiting on the right time to really publicize that, because Joe Biden knows he has the power. But he's going to have to wait for the right moment to let that come out. Because, a few months ago, he was saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to wait until Congress gives me a bill for $10,000 of student loan debt cancellation. And he knows that they're not going to do that. So I think he's, finally feeling the pressure of the accountability that a lot of people are trying to hold him to. And I think, stimulus payments like that, canceling debt, really working on affordable housing, working on healthcare, because he has the ability to leverage the cost of prescription drugs, things like that. Those are the types of stimulus payments that we can start thinking about now that we've gone through 3 rounds of direct payments.
Thank you, Nigel. That was definitely a comprehensive answer, and I agree with so much of what you said. Just holding our leaders accountable in the sense that there's so much more we can do outside of the scope of direct payments, and so many avenues that we can help others, feel economic relief. How about you, Toby? What have you thought about the stimulus response and the economic recovery that Joe Biden has been trying to enact?
I think Simone spoke to this earlier when she was talking about the minimum wage as an issue about how, people's wages are not able to keep up with the rises, changes in costs. And this has been a trend for years, for decades now, of the real wages not catching up with increases in productivity. So as technology improves, American workers are putting out so much, or just creating so much, they're doing so much work, yet their wages don't match that. And that just speaks to the corporations, that speaks to the bosses stealing more of their surplus value. That's just what that is. And I think what we've seen with the pandemic is kind of seeing all these cascading things, all these cascading problems that the working class people of America face with, kind of, hit like the straw hit the camel's back, and in other nations around the world, that aren't even perfect, were able to help support their citizens with, stimulus money in order to support them. And not only that, but also to encourage people to stay home. A big reason why a lot of people wanted to, didn't want to lock down, didn't want to protect themselves physically, is because of fear of not being able to work and starving. And I think that's legitimate in this world where if you don't work, you starve, literally. So I think ultimately these stimulus that we see was insignificant, I wouldn't say it's insignificant because any little thing could help, but it was insufficient is a better word. Definitely insufficient. And I think that speaks to kind of the priorities of our government at large. Lots of companies haven't been paying any taxes for years, yet they struggle to give working class families money that they need. The U.S. Army has a ballooning budget, often 5 times China, I think 10 times Russia, yet they can't put money in order for people to put food on their families' tables. I think that speaks to the priorities of this government.
Thank you, Toby. I really appreciate that. And it's very true. Just the priorities have been, so interesting to see that this country continues to uphold. How about you, Simone? How have you felt about the economic response and the stimulus checks? Has it been sufficient for you, or how are you feeling?
I think it would have been, I think to Toby's point and to Nigel's point, I think it would be more sufficient if it was continuous. I mean, I know like in Canada, for example, they've been getting a check every month since last year. So I think like $1,400, like to Toby's point, yeah, it looks insufficient, but if you get $1,400, you can count on it each month for the past year of this catastrophe, then I'm like, okay, I can mess with that a little bit more. But I think it's done what it can. I mean, whatever $1,400 can do. I mean, I know some people, at least out here where I live, $1,400, that would be gone just on rent, much less food or utilities and stuff like that. So I think it's done enough of what $1,400 can do, if that makes any sense. Personally speaking, I think also to Nigel's point, I think that there was a decent effort to speak about what other forms of stimulus were involved in the American Rescue Plan in terms of extending SNAP benefits. Although I think in the child tax credit, but even those extensions of stimulus were restricted given your income. And I think that is something that should be more inclusive, because I don't know exactly what the income cutoff, but I know $150,000 in certain states is rich. In my state, it is not. So therefore, I think there needs to be more of a comprehensive and sufficient way that stimulus could be brought to the economy. And I think just the way to do it is by state income, whatever you're a dependent, independent, whatever, is to do that student loan thing, just because that affects so many people across the board. And I think to Nigel's point earlier, it would tremendously help to stimulate the economy for almost a generation at least. I mean, there's whole kids and people who are still paying off student loans, and it's enabling them to buy a house or to buy a car to further their education. And I think it would help to not only stimulate the economy for this moment, but also for years in the future. So, yeah.
Excellent. I mean, we knew this would be an insightful conversation. We knew this was going to be an in-depth conversation tonight. And you guys are definitely giving us, you're giving us the goods. It is 8:25. And so we're going to take a short break, but we have some more great questions when we come back. And hopefully our congregation, our audience will give us a few questions as well. You guys, if you have questions for these panelists, please put them in the chat. Audience, we are looking for your questions wherever you are. Throw them in the chat, and then after we come back from this break, we will get to asking. Okay.
Lord, I done done. Lord, talking about Lord, I done done. Lord, I done done. Lord, I done done. Well, I done done what you told me to do. Well, you told me to sing and I done that too. Well, I done done what you told me to do. I said you told me to pray and I done that too. Well, I done what you told me to talk about, Lord, I done. Lord, I Well, I done what you told me to do. Talking about, Lord, I done. Lord, I done. Lord, I done. Well, I done what you told me to do. Well, you told me to shout and I done that too. Well, I done what you told me to do. I said you told me to, and I done that too. Well, I done what you told me to. Talking about Lord, Lord, I done. Talking about Lord, Lord, I done. Lord, I done. Well, I done what you told me to. Talking about Lord, Lord, I done. Talking about Lord.
Welcome back. I hope you have your questions ready. Go ahead and drop them in the chat so that we can ask these students. In the meantime, I want to pick up something, Nigel, that you said earlier. You said about the stimulus checks. You said, you know, we need to not play word games, right? You said 2000, make it 2000. But I think another place that the kind of word games thing is coming out is also when we talk about immigration, right? So when we had Trump in office, they were kids in cages. And now they are minors, unsolicited minors. What are they? I don't know the terminology that we're quite using
Unaccompanied.
Unaccompanied, thank you. Unaccompanied minors, right? So now they're unaccompanied minors that we're having to hold at the border. So I want you all to talk about the immigration a little bit, and specifically, I want you all to talk about the basically the language, right, and how we're kind of skating around that. And I'm going to start with Simone actually on this one.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a change in wording, but maybe not a change in circumstance. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's in my throat. But I think with President Biden, I think for me at least, I believe that there is a different reason, I guess is the word, as to why those kids are still being left down there. I don't think it's acceptable. And I think one thing that's given me the indication that it's a different reason is that the administration has also admitted that they don't think it's acceptable either. Which is a contrast to the Trump administration, which previously under the Obama administration, there was the Central American Minors Program where these kids would be able to apply for asylum in their home country without having to come here without any direction of where they are going and making this dangerous, perilous journey. And I think obviously that was ended under Trump, and there seemed to be obviously a great disregard for what was going to happen to these kids, trying to connect them to a sponsor, connect them to family members that may already be in the country, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that there still should be, a need and a desire to apply pressure to this administration so that they understand that these children do not need to be kept in these types of facilities whatsoever. I just don't think that that's okay, simply because there's a lot of psychological trauma that could happen that could possibly not be undone. And if so, it'll be very difficult to do so. So I think that in terms of the semantics around it, I think the words have probably changed in a way slightly because there's a slight different intention. I think with Trump, there was obviously a very xenophobic passion behind that as to why these kids were in cages, because there was a lack of disregard towards these children because of what they looked like. And I don't think that that's the same reason why some of these children are still kept in these facilities. I would like to think it's because of a lack of resources, although that's not acceptable. I think that that's more of a logistical thing that could happen with anything. And I think even the simple fact that, a lot of kids had to be spaced more because of the pandemic versus over 2 to almost 3 years ago now, when Trump started doing it, it was not that same situation. So I think the words have changed, but I feel like people's attention needs to continue to be on that situation.
Absolutely. Toby, can you jump in on this topic as well?
This is something that's really important to me, but something I would like to make a correction is that the kids in cages, so to speak, didn't start under Trump. This started under the Obama administration. And I think this is something that we've seen as part of the United States border policy in general. That's not just specific to the Trump administration. So we were able to see the more fascistic, the more racist xenophobic rhetoric from the Trump administration, but at the same time, the kids are still in cages. So even if Stephen Miller is not the one who's in charge, who's putting people in cages, it still doesn't change the fact that they're still in cages. And not only that, but they still in overcrowded places where there's chance for the spread of diseases and whatnot. And not only that, but we're also talking about like the African immigrants that are being put into these immigration facilities. I remember like a couple of weeks ago, the State Department put out a tweet telling Haitian immigrants, don't come here. They even put it in Creole, being inclusive in their, I would say, their xenophobia, they're being inclusive. And I think that speaks to a problem within the American foreign policy in general. It's coming. I think this wave of unaccompanied minors isn't a problem that's unique to the Biden administration. However, I do think it speaks to a flaws in how we approach our neighbors to the south. From majority of these children are coming from Central America. These are countries that have often been affected by American foreign policy as recently as with Honduras, with a coup that was supported in 2009. So I think these are the different things that we have to speak to when we're talking about immigration. When we look at what's going on in Haiti right now, and there's a lot of immigrants coming from there, and yet the U.S. State Department is supporting the president who's overstaying his term, contrary to the wish of the Haitian people. So I think this is all connected.
Absolutely, and I want to pull out something that you said, but that has actually it's kind of been sprinkled throughout the conversation tonight. A lot of these problems, most of these problems, right, other than COVID, are not new problems, and I think that that's really important to highlight as we talk about this. Some of this stuff is carried over, from the Trump administration, right? But some of this stuff is not just carried over from the Trump administration, but literally this is American policy for decades that has produced the problems that we're seeing now. And so it's not, that's why students are having to we're having to pull back. These are not new problems, but they are still things that we have to talk about. And Nigel, do you want to add into the immigration question or anything that, was said tonight?
Yeah, I think failing to plan is planning to fail. President Biden has only been in for a few months. However, we knew that a wave was coming. People, 2019, 2020 saw the lowest year in recent years for people coming across the southern border. That's because no one was able to travel in the world. The world was shut down. So it's not surprising that there's a large spike happening now, but we knew that was going to come. And even though Joe Biden wasn't in charge for the majority of the year, the people who are at the border control, Homeland Security, a lot of those people, they're standard government bureaucrats, they're standard government employees. They've been there. Regardless of who the president was, they should have been planning for these types of things. And so now we're even seeing times when Joe Biden and the people who are at the border are disagreeing on policy. You have Joe Biden saying one thing. He's saying he doesn't want children in Homestead, which is one of the detention facilities we have here in Florida. And that's going against, some of the recommendations of his border agencies. There really has to be a lot of unification in terms of what they're talking about. But also to Simone's point, this is a very psychologically traumatizing thing for someone to travel, thousands of miles across very difficult terrain to come to the United States just to be locked up, separated from your parents, placed in a place where, where people aren't necessarily speaking the language that you're speaking. So when you see Border Patrol agents there separating kids and putting them into facilities, that's not the right way you're supposed to be doing this. And that's where President Biden is supposed to be responsible. He has, a lot of agencies at his disposal. He has FEMA that can go down there to make sure that even if it's not a detention center, he can place these children in centers that, don't feel like a prison, where they can actually be treated and, receive the resources that he needs. He has the Department of Health and Human Services that can be there to provide them mental health services, to make sure that their physical health is being taken care of. A lot of these things have to be taken into consideration. And so, that's what, when we have new leadership and leadership that's trying to kind of take control now, they have to be kind of cognizant of the resources that they have available to them to make sure that people are being treated fairly. So I think, going forward, we can't blame Trump for everything. Joe Biden's going to have to kind of get his administration in order and start providing the children at the border the right things that we need. And to the previous point, this is not a Joe Biden issue, a Trump issue, an Obama issue. This is years of American foreign policy and immigration policy that's just been failing. And so we really need to start focusing on that and making sure that issue gets solved and we don't just leave it as another talking point at every election.
Thank you, Nigel. I definitely agree with that. This is a systematic issue. It's something that's been embedded and that's been problematic for years now. It's not something that arose overnight within one administration. And we have to take a systematic approach to, dismantle the problems we see within it. So I definitely agree with that. I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and talk about this issue of police reform or police abolition or however people are feeling. I know the White House kind of backed in March the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which was, they said would address systematic racism, curb police brutality, and save lives. And, the legislation would have really bold reforms, which would ban chokeholds, stop no-knock warrants, and end the court created qualified immunity doctrine, combat racial profiling, and a whole slew of other things. I just kind of want to know you guys' thoughts on either police reform or how that issue is being handled, or should we be moving towards abolition instead of reform? We can start with Toby.
I started off this conversation saying that I've critiqued President Biden from when he was candidate, Vice President Biden, for his positions on police brutality. And I do not think the Biden administration has the tools, even the imagination to solve the problem that comes with police brutality. They're talking about giving the police more money for training. Well, that's been done before. Giving them more money for resources. And when we realize what we need to do is take away resources for them to use to harm us and put those resources into other things. Things like the 1033 program where military equipment goes to police departments, the controlled equipment the flow of controlled equipment is increasing actually under the Biden administration. So that's some of the most dangerous stuff, and this stuff is all on conditional loans. So like the federal government can call in their loan and take back their equipment, the most dangerous equipment. And we saw last summer, some of us even intimately were able to see last summer what the violence of police militarization in general. So I do not believe that they have the answers to solving our problems in that sense. But at the same time, I am encouraged by the work that organizers are doing, and not only just educating, but actually putting in work in order to try and change things in general. But for the most part, I am not satisfied with what President Biden is doing.
Thank you, Toby. How about you, Nigel? What have your thoughts been on police reform or police abolition or the efforts done to curb brutality?
Definitely echoing some of Toby's points. President Biden has the authority really to shape what his budget is going to look like. And so that he's got the power to add money here and take away money here. And so especially after this year, the militarization of police. It's frightening to really see police officers walking through American cities. You'd think we're conditioned in the United States of America to believe like that's what other countries are going through, when it's really the stuff that's happening right here at home. And Toby's point, the federal government has the ability to take those weapons back, right? And we have the ability to stop selling them at all. I don't think we should be providing military grade weapons to America's police, because that's not what they're supposed to be there for. But also to Toby's point about, Joe Biden not knowing what's best in terms of policing, that's right. I mean, the federal government honestly doesn't know what's right for policing. I live in the state of Florida. And so when we're talking about abolition or even defunding the police, our governor made it very clear, if any city in the state of Florida even thinks about trying to do that, he's going to cut off their funding, right? And so what might work in Minneapolis is not going to work in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And so usually we go look to the federal government because they're on the national scale and they're able to provide things at scale, to provide some sort of uniformity in terms of how we're going to do things across the country. But it's not as simple as saying, hey, we're going to do this across the board and this is going to solve the issue. It's not going to work that way. I think what the president should be looking to do, and even including this in the Justice and Policing Act, is making it a city-centered approach. Cities know what they need to do to make their city safe. And most importantly, the activists in their cities know what they need to do to push their cities to make the right decisions. I think, in talking about defunding police and providing cities with alternative forms of public safety and mental health counseling and alternative forms of, traffic violations, I think what the federal government can do is pay for it. Provide the money. Tell cities, hey, if we're going to provide you the money, we'll offer this money to you if you decide that you're going to create an alternative form of policing. You decide that you're going to create an alternative form of public safety, and we'll give you the money to do that. But we shouldn't, at the federal level, be saying this is what the federal policy is going to be, because it's not going to work around the country, and it's really going to cause a lot of pushback.
That's really poignant as a reflection. Thank you so much for that. And how about Simone? Do you have anything to offer to this?
Definitely. I think also to add on to Nigel's point about it being a city to city approach, the city of Berkeley, California, where UC Berkeley is located, they actually, a couple months ago, about 2 to 3 months ago, they actually decreed that armed police officers will not be doing traffic violations, to Nigel's point. So if it's like not just the meter maid, I think it's pretty much either the meter maids that are going to take that over, who aren't armed and dangerous, in my opinion, and or citizens that are going to stop people. And if a cop pulls them over, the cop is not able to go up to the window and tell them to roll down their window, and ask for license and registration. That'll just be citizens and or meter maids, essentially, in that case. So I think a city by city approach definitely works, because again, like even from city to city, what works in Oakland is not going to work necessarily in Richmond. What works in LA is not going to work in where I grew up in Fairfield, California, that is a very, very small suburban military town. And it's just very different. I think where the federal government can come in is in the same way that they could come in with gun control or voting rights, is that having a floor and setting a floor saying you're not going to do any of these chokeholds, you're not doing any of that. This qualified immunity junk needs to go away. And I think especially the demilitarization of the police, I believe that if the president truly wanted to get at the core in a way of police brutality, I think that is definitely a sticking point. And I think it's helpful just simply because the reason why we have an excess of these weapons is because of a war that started at the beginning of my lifetime, that a lot of people that fought in that war think that was ridiculous. And I think it's even more compounded in its ridiculousness, seeing those things on city streets and having tanks and whatever else the SWAT team has. I mean, that ends up messing up the city streets that the city has to go back and repave. So I think it's simply, it's just very redundant and it's ridiculous. And I think that can go a long way in terms of not just a monetary value in terms of how much money is going to be saved in terms of maintaining those vehicles or maintaining the streets that those vehicles have to go out on, but also just making sure that people feel safe. I'm not going to walk up to a police officer and say, hey, somebody's broke into my house if you have a machine gun. That's just not happening. And for me, amongst many other reasons, but that's an imminent threat. And I think that if we really want to talk about safety, that's something that we just don't need, period. And that's just how I feel. But also, I think also to Toby's point, I do believe that it's more of an activist, community-driven thing that needs to occur in order to inform these conversations properly. For example, after George Floyd was tragically murdered last year, I was part of an organization here in Richmond that helped to get police out of West Contra Costa Unified School Districts and all their schools. And that's another area where police do not need to be. And I feel like that also adds to the militarization of police, simply the fact that there's a police officer in your school. And also to the fact that, people are talking about defunding the police is going to make people less safe. Two points to that. I think that I think a lot of us, we don't want no policing. We just want the policing that people in suburban areas get. And I would know because I grew up in a suburban area where there was no police presence. Whereas where I live here now, there's a very obvious police presence in certain areas. And that's something that it's not unthinkable. It hasn't not already been done. And also to the point of adding more funding to train and do this, I just know in any other job, if people give you money and you automatically are not doing what you need to do with the immense amount of money that you're already getting, I'm not giving you any more money. I just know that. And even to Nigel's point, with their defunding the police that they did in Minneapolis, I think they took out 8% of their budget, but I believe their budget is almost $600 million. So 8% of $600 million is a drop in the bucket. And not to say that's not good and it's a good faith effort to something better, but if we're really talking about defund the police, I don't think people understand how big these police budgets actually are. So therefore, even if I defund you, you'll be okay. So I think that there needs to be a federal understanding of maintaining a floor, but also to Nigel's point and to Toby's point, there needs to be a more local community informing of how policing needs to be reimagined.
Thank you, Simone. Excuse me. I think Toby had something to add to this as a wrap up.
Yeah, to kind of bring it back to holding the Biden administration accountable, I think the main issue is that the Biden administration is committed to a idea of policing that's carceral, that is, colonial, so to speak, that is racist. And ultimately, I come from my community. The way our interaction with the police are informed is that they don't keep us safe. The only people that keep us safe are us. And for us, the people in our community, nobody wants, violence, nobody wants crime, but they do want to be protected, and they don't feel like the police protects them. And that's part of the mandate of policing in and of itself. So I think it's important for us to be able to think radically and to think imaginatively about what the solutions are. And I don't think policing is the solutions to the problems that we have. I think we have to look within ourselves.
Excellent. You guys. Sorry, you all. This is. I hate that it is 8:50. I literally hate that it is almost 9 o'clock right now because there's so much more that we could go into. This has been another excellent night. You all are you're geniuses. And I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Toby, like you mentioned, that we need creativity, right? Who even has the creativity to make these, to make up legislation that is going to be meaningful and that's going to make a difference? I'm full. I'm so excited. I know my mom calls me old, but you guys, I'm going to say it anyway. I'm really hopeful for my future every time I get on this program. I genuinely feel hopeful for the future because you guys, you show up. Thank you all. Thank you to these panelists, Simone, Nigel, Toby. Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience for sticking with us. We could not do this without you. Thank you to the chapel staff, Dean Richardson, for helping us or allowing us to do this program every other week, excuse me. And thank you to our producer, Mr. Joseph Diller, who is in the back right now, who you can't see, but who just does an amazing job every program. We are so thankful for you. We do have one more video, and Erica, can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to see?
Okay, Cynthia, I do just want to echo your sentiments of thanking so many people who've made this program happen. You all are truly the brightest hopes we have for our future, and I'm really thankful for that. But right before, the end of this program, we do have a video from the Howard Gospel Choir of Howard University, and it's going to be an excerpt from their Let Freedom Sing program that's available on demand on the Howard Gospel Choir Facebook and YouTube page. If you'd like to connect with Howard Gospel Choir, please visit howardgospelchoir.com. So thank you all so much, and we're excited to see a little excerpt from their concert. So thank you all, and I hope you all have a great week. So